Welcome to Season 5, Episode 192 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 16th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite our sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Before we get started, I'd like to congratulate Melissa Thom on launching her very own podcast. Longtime listeners will recognize Melissa, who has recorded 3 episodes, all linked in our show notes today. Episode 52, Schoolwide Culture of Reading, Episode 77, Virtual Culture of Reading, and Episode 92, Media Literacy Essentials. Well, Melissa has her own podcast. It's called The Joyful Learning Podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Amazon Music. And friends, I've listened to it. It's really fun, and it provides such a great perspective on how we can find joy in our everyday. And I'm going to read the description provided here. Welcome to The Joyful Learning Pod, a new podcast and online community whose mission is to highlight and celebrate examples of joyful lifelong learning, both inside and outside of the classroom. Join host Melissa Thom and her personal and professional learning network of friends or soon-to-be friends that include educators, authors, librarians, makers, and others who are passionate about making teaching and learning joyful for all children, young adults, and educators everywhere. Tune in to find your people and bring about important and impactful change to your entire educational community. Sarah in Washington State wrote to the podcast, and I asked if I could share her message. Sarah wrote, "Hi, Amy. I'm late to the party, but started listening to your podcast this summer. I'd love to hear a podcast focus on legislative advocacy, especially with librarians from states that have made positive progress in requiring teacher librarians in all K-12 schools. I live in Washington, and Washington Library Association School Library Division and Advocacy Committee are preparing to launch a campaign. K-12 Librarians for All WA, focused on removing a loophole that allows districts to use funds intended for school library staffing, parentheses, by qualified teacher librarians, and parentheses, for other things. I'd love to learn what has worked in other places or just hear a discussion about creative ways librarians have advocated for themselves and their students. If I'm being honest, I'd also like to get the word out about hashtag K-12 Librarians for All WA as well. Our campaign site, parentheses, a very much work in progress, and parentheses, is included. Friends, I'll put all of these links and social media in our show notes today. Listeners can learn more about our campaign, and especially for your Washington listeners, they can find action steps, shareable social media graphics, and ways they can help. And the site will be updated as we make progress. Friends, I love hearing how people are mobilizing to make sure that we are protecting not only our jobs, but also the funding for our jobs. And I did tell Sarah that we have an advocacy playlist in our show notes. And friends, you can find that advocacy playlist. And I'm hoping to follow up with Sarah in the future and hear how this has been going. Definitely make sure that you take a look at the website because it gives a lot of great ideas that other organizations can replicate in their particular states and countries around the world. And I know our advocacy episodes that we've recorded over the past have spanned countries and different states, and we've all found ways to make sure that our message is getting heard loud and clear. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Melissa in Illinois, Angela in Ohio, and Liz in Texas. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook. On Twitter, my handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning Pebble Go research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. And now for a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, I have made no secret of the fact that I absolutely love nonfiction. So when I take a look at the offerings that Capstone has, I can't help but get excited about some of these books. And some of them I have made a point of buying whenever I have been in a library that suits this age group. And in this case, we're going to talk about a series today called Kids Guides. I think you'll agree that there are times when we buy books because we have certain kids in mind. And I know that there are kids who love these books. And the fun thing about this is that these are the kinds of books that can excite some of the most hard to please readers. They're readers, they just don't know they are. There are 6 books in this series, and I think they're a terrific investment, not only in our collection, but in our readers. The first book is The Kid's Guide to Collecting Stuff, and I can remember my own children wanting to collect stuff in the worst way when they were all in middle school. And thankfully, that time of our lives is over. Also, there is a book called The Kid's Guide to Duct Tape Projects. And we had one who made many things out of duct tape. And there's another book in this series called The Kid's Guide to Jumping Rope, which, when I think about it, would be a fantastic tie-in with your phys ed program. The other book that I thought was fantastic was The Kid's Guide to Magic Tricks. And this is fun because I have looked for books about magic that kids can do, and sometimes they are just either incredibly dated or overly complicated. And this one definitely fits the gap in that collection you might have. This one I own, and this is The Kid's Guide to Projects for Your Pet. And if you have a collection like mine, when I was teaching elementary, our pet collection, I mean, I'm talking about all the different breeds and all the different fancy pets that you could own. This is something that really does speak to our elementary students, and the fact that they can make crafts for their pets is so adorable. So I love this book, and I want to make sure that these books are up and out in a display where students can see them, because otherwise they might miss them. And the last one, and this is one of the best books I've ever seen, it's called The Kid's Guide to Sign Language. Again, sign language is one of those things that when kids get interested in them, it is so hard to find books which are age appropriate, and this one does a fantastic job. I've made sure that all of the elementary schools I've ever worked in has had this particular book. It's by Catherine Clay, The Kid's Guide to Sign Language. I'm so grateful Capstone has decided to continue their support of the podcast. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very generous discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone Interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Recruiting and Shortages, and my conversation with Tamara Cox. Tamara Cox, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, truly.
Tamara, I'm hoping you will let listeners know where in the country you are. Tell us about your library, the grades you support, the programs that you offer, because they seem to be award-winning. Many people are taking notice.
So I'm in the upstate of South Carolina in a pretty rural suburban area. So we have lots of cows. When I drive to school, we pass the cows. We have, I serve 9th through 12th grade, and I have about 1,200 plus students. And in addition to being the librarian, I also sponsor our book club, and we're starting a new gaming club this year.
Fantastic. Are those like esports or are those tabletop games?
So far, we're going to do Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. And probably some board games too.
Yes, we have quite a few sort of games that have sprung up just spontaneously. And since we offer after school, we get a lot of kids in there. I know that that's very popular. Before we get started, you were the 2018 I Love My Librarian winner. Please share with listeners what got the attention of the award committee.
So that was actually just really such an amazing recognition. And I think what caught their attention was the amount of collaborations that I do, not only with a variety of subjects at school, from foods class to forensic science and everything in between, but also I partner with our community organizations and other schools in our feeder system. We've done used Flipgrid to do book discussions with a local college with their contemporary literature students, and a Wishy project with our elementary students. And so I just try to connect our little school library to lots of other places outside of just our school campus.
That sounds amazing. I would love to pick your brain about all of those. But today, our focus is on recruiting and shortages. And in 2020, it was incredibly memorable for you, I assume for a good reason. You were one of Library Journal's movers and shakers in the advocate category, which for me, right. I'm fascinated. Friends, I've included links in our show notes to these articles. But Tamara, I'd love to learn more about your mover and shaker designation.
So I served as the legislative chair for the South Carolina Association of School Librarians, or SCASL for short. And many of the advocacy events and programs that we planned with that committee, I believe got, my recognition for this award. So we have one event called the South Carolina Read-In that we co-planned with the South Carolina State Library. We have thousands of kids from across the state come to our State House grounds. We celebrate reading. They spread across the grounds and read, and we meet with legislators. And it's just a great way to connect with them and remind them how important libraries are for our communities. We also have gone to the National Library Legislative Day in Washington, D.C. and shared our message there. And we have a state library legislative day that we co-planned with the South Carolina Library Association. So a lot of us really partner well together and work well together to highlight both school and public libraries.
I love that it is really recognizing that the world of library is so much bigger than the space we occupy. It's so incredibly easy for librarians to I don't want to say hyperfixate, but just absolutely become consumed with the minutia of every element of what is in our immediate space, that we fail to recognize the community of libraries, that the greater writ large community of libraries we belong to.
Yeah, we partner with our public libraries here. We partner with our state libraries. I have great friends in the academic libraries that we work together on advocacy. So, we really are just stronger when we work together.
Well, and raising the profile of all of us in every aspect of librarianship. And now this is all going to make a great deal of sense to listeners because you are also the current president of this organization, yes. of the South Carolina Association of School Librarians. And I am so impressed. Friends, it's so easy to listen to these guests and feel like I'm not doing enough, but recognize that when guests come on this show, one of the big reasons is because they are just that inspiring. And I don't want to make sure that I'm not the only beneficiary of this conversation. So Tamara, where are you in your presidential run right now? I know it's about a 3-year commitment.
Right. So our first year is a president-elect year, and your main job is to plan the conference. And to me, I think that's the hardest year. So I survived that part. And now I'm in the presidency year. And then we kind of, run the business meetings and set goals for the organization and be the face of the organization. And then the third year, you're the past president. And we have an emerging leaders program that our past president is in charge of, and then just kind of assist the others as they're going through the process. So, but also, I have laundry that piles up and my kids eat McDonald's too much. And so, maybe you're like, wow, she really has it all together. And no, I just sacrifice in other areas because I think what our organization does is very important.
Well, and friends, I think we can appreciate anytime we take on these obligations because they're important to us. It is also with a great deal of conversation that's happened in the background with those who are in our lives, our partners and the people who would most directly notice our absence if we weren't there.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, my husband's going to be really excited when my 3 years is finished.
You know what? But I know that the state of South Carolina is in good hands. I am so grateful for this conversation today. I'm hoping you can provide listeners with some insight because your state organization, SCASL, is the recipient of the AASL's Chapter of the Year Award. And I'm fascinated because I've yet to be able to have this particular question be asked to any of my guests. Friends, I've included the press release in the show notes. Am I right that at least 2 of the programs mentioned, the Emerging Leader Program as well as the Teacher Cadet Program, are actually directly related to today's conversation about recruiting and shortages in South Carolina?
Yes, it's really on our mind and something that's important to us. And that was part of our recognition for Chapter of the Year is our outreach to other people to try to recruit and promote the profession. So we were very excited for our efforts to be recognized.
Well, and well, they should be, because these are programs, and I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about them later in the conversation. These are programs which could be replicated across the country and around the world, because I know that teacher shortages are a very real problem that many districts are dealing with, but the librarian shortage is one that is also a very real issue as well. You've provided some terrific resources, friends. Make sure that you spend some time in our show notes from an organization which some of us might not have ever heard of, SLIDE, SLIDE. Could you give listeners who are tuning in and hearing about this for the first time, this is a great organization to help us. What can you tell us more about it?
Okay, so SLIDE is short for School Librarian Investigation, Decline, or Evolution. And it's being led by Dr. Deborah Cachell and Keith Curry-Lance. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they are really investigating the inequities of where school librarians are, where they have been cut, where there are a great need for them. And it shows that it is an equity issue for our country because through their research, they have found majority Black or African American districts are almost twice as likely to lose their librarians, and also districts with the most students living in poverty. And those are 2 groups that can benefit the most from a school library program. So it's very just disheartening to see the research, but also motivating because we want to do something about it. And they have done great research, and they have so many things on their website where you can dive into that and see what the specifics are for your area.
Well, and I think it's especially important because it's all well and good if we understand the situation in our own state. But yes, in order to get a better understanding, we need to be able to see this on a nationwide level. And to our international listeners, this is a problem which if it gives one perspective when you can see on a nationwide level how this problem is impacting all of us differently, in large part because of and we're going to talk about this some more, because of some of these the legislation that's in place and the funding and where that all comes from. So, friends, the topic of today's conversation, recruiting and shortages, is one which will resonate differently with you depending on where you're living. Let's go ahead and start with the issue of shortages. There's a really sort of, I say fantastic, but it's an upsetting map in our show notes because it's a helpful map, but it's discouraging because, it does reveal the 2 major reasons why there are shortages. And that would be state mandates and the number of higher institutions which are issuing certificates and degrees in library science.
Yeah, so let's start with the mandates. So there are 10 states and the District of Columbia who have mandates to require a school librarian, and they enforce those. South Carolina is one of those. So in the links, there's a link to our regulation. So if there's any states that are trying to add that regulation, you can look at ours as an example for writing your own and trying to share that with legislators. And then there are 16 that have mandates, but they don't enforce them. So, what's the point if you're not enforcing it? And then there's 24 states that have no mandate at all. So what that does is it leaves our position vulnerable. So when they're having trouble with public school funding, or if they're cutting funding, it makes us a position that they may cut because they're not legally required to have it, where there are other positions that they are legally required to, so they cannot cut them. So it is important to know what the laws are in your state and try to work from that point to do some sort of advocacy work to make a change.
Absolutely. Well, and also sort of scary is there are fewer institutions which are conferring degrees, just
right.
numerically speaking. I know when I started my library science degree, this would have been 20 years ago. Well, yeah, 20 years ago. There were two universities. I had my choice of the University of Michigan, and I had my choice of Wayne State University in Detroit. But now it's just Wayne State is the only institution now, and they're trying to make up for that because you can now get the degree completely online. And am I right? That's sort of the solution. We've got a diminishing number of conferring institutions, but we have institutions that now offer degrees that are completely online, certificates that are completely online.
Yeah, so in South Carolina, we just have one. I mean, and they're amazing. It's the University of South Carolina. Their iSchool is great. That I'm a graduate of there, proud graduate of there. But, it is just the one. And they do have a lot, like their degree is also fully online, so they can reach anyone. But it's still just the one group trying to produce as many librarians as possible when there's many more leaving than there are coming in to get the degree.
Absolutely. I know that the United States is already grappling with a shortage of K-12 teachers, but what can you tell us about the shortage of certified school librarians?
Right. So you take that major issue of a teacher shortage and amplify it even more for such a specific position like we have for school librarians. It's a complicated, issue because there are some that maybe don't know about the degree, or maybe they've never worked with us in a school where they have a good school library program where they consider that as an option. In South Carolina, we have an organization that keeps track of our critical needs areas. So what are our most critical areas for teaching positions? And consistently, school librarian is one of, if not the top number. So it is a very high needs area for us. And like we mentioned earlier, it may be different in different states depending on their laws that are in place. But, we have that law that says if you have more than 375 students, you should have a school librarian. So people are trying to fill that spot, and there's just not enough people to put in those positions.
It's interesting because you mentioned something that hit home for me, that many people don't consider going into librarianship because they don't have any real connection or strong memory to working with a librarian. And I think that speaks to, we're sort of battling this issue of stereotypes and what many people sort of think of in terms of the librarian that we might have grown up with. And it is hard for some, especially if you didn't have the benefit of a librarian who really made an impact on your life when you were growing up, to imagine that's who you could be. I know for me, Carla will forever be my inspiration and the reason why I'm sitting here today, because she was my lifesaver as a teacher. I will say that had a very meaningful impact on me. If my library, when I was a struggling a new high school teacher, if I didn't have Carla to inspire me and say, wow, I want to do your job. I don't know about my job, but I want to do your job. And I think it's easy for those of us who've had that experience of working with somebody who's just so inspiring and has managed to really help them in making a difference in their own classroom. But you're right. If you are an educator in a building with no librarian, why would that occur to you to become one?
Yeah. And when you get your education degree, which is where many librarians come from, the classroom to the library, not everyone, but some, I don't remember them mentioning working with the librarian at all as part of my degree. So I would not have considered it at that point either. So that's a missed opportunity as well.
Well, and you're right. So the pre-service teachers, it would be great to be able to get in on that conversation and say, part of the things they should be doing when they're doing their student teaching is work with a school librarian. And then you sort of have an issue of what happens when you get placed in a school without a school librarian.
Right. And that's part of what we did with our work with SCASL was we have a pre-service committee, and Tracy Burrell, who is our chair, and I have gone to some local colleges on the Student Teachers Orientation Day. So they get to talk to us for about 10 or 15 minutes, and we share with them, get to know your secretary, get to know your custodian, and get to know your librarian because we can be your best friend. And also, if you want to become a librarian, we share some details with them about how they can explore that career.
What's complicating our shortage? Are school librarians leaving the program? Are they retiring sooner than expected? Or are just fewer educators contemplating getting certified as school librarians? And friends, for me, this is anecdotal. Like I can reflect on my own lived experiences. I'd love to hear what Tamara has to say about this first, though, because you are in a position where you have been so well versed in the data that has gone into what you've done moving forward in your state organization.
I think some of it is just part of that teacher shortage part. Some of it is negative media or stereotypes about what a librarian is and what we do every day. And then I really think, especially the last couple of years, these attacks on intellectual freedom and being threatened and called names on social media and sort of being made into this villain, it is not really helping our cause. When we're trying to recruit people into this amazing job, it makes some people nervous that they're going to be threatened or attacked or have these confrontations that they see in the media right now.
Well, and I'll tell you, you couldn't pay me to go back into the classroom. I'm just, friends, let's just go. I'm just going on record. You could not pay me to go back to the classroom. And yet, when I was hired in my last district, I remember finding out that there were certified school librarians in the classroom. And my initial response was, oh my gosh, I've made a big mistake. I'm going to lose my job. They're going to want to come out of the classroom and take my job because I had been hired to fill a vacancy. And I realized very quickly I didn't have anything to worry about because in my district that I previously worked in, nobody wanted the job I had taken because it was in 4 buildings. So these were certified school librarians who elected not to be in the library because the job itself was that unappealing. And longtime listeners of this podcast will know I've not been shy about sharing some of these experiences covering 4 buildings each year. But the reality is we had certified school librarians in the district who could have taken those vacancies and elected not to. And I'm not saying this is the case anywhere else, but I'm saying the case, my personal experience, that if the job doesn't look like you're being set up for success, I'll use that sort of phrase, being set up for success. When you look at a job description and look at it and say, there are too many compromises there. I don't see a path towards being successful when you have created a job where one person covers 4 buildings. And I know other school librarians have shared that experience where they travel from building to building. And the challenge of building relationships is really hampered because you never stay anywhere long enough and get to know and work with those people. I know this is the first year I've been in one building in 8 years, and it was just eye-opening. I can't tell you how I really got very emotional when I realized I didn't have to pack up at lunch and go switch buildings. That when I met these coworkers, they were going to be there tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. Because when you travel to 4 buildings, you might go days without seeing those people again. And providing that continuity of service is incredibly difficult. So I think that part of the problem, at least from what I'm seeing, is the job itself does not look desirable. That if you are moving from building to building, that for some people is a deal breaker right there. Why take a job that requires me to move from building to building when I can just stay right here in my classroom and take my pay raise because I have a master's in library science?
Right. I can't even imagine doing multiple buildings. So kudos to you and all the people that do it. I just really feel for you. That was a very difficult challenge.
Well, and I think we make decisions for different reasons. Many of us make personal decisions. I know the trade-off was I had a commute of about 45 seconds. So, so when you have children at home, I was taking care of my mother. Having a commute of 45 seconds, you're going to make some compromises. And at some point when the opportunity presents itself, you move on. So you learn from it. And friends, I want to make sure that we keep this conversation positive, but this is a problem. Filling our libraries with people who are certified and have had an opportunity to take classes in a program that's nationally recognized. It's very interesting because I will share another personal experience. I interviewed for a library job in that district with 33 graduate credits in library science. And when they realized I hadn't finished my degree, they told me to come back. They wouldn't even finish the interview because I only had 33 of my 36 credits. That was 14 years ago. And I had gone to them and said, hey, I'm finishing my degree. I've got 3 more credits to take. They're like, we only hire certified school librarians and you're not certified yet.
Wow.
Now,
I don't think people are so picky anymore because.
Well, and in a nice twist of irony, they hired 2 classroom teachers this year who hadn't even stepped foot, in a library program. And the state of Michigan now offers an 18 credit certificate program. That is the solution. Instead of requiring a master's in library science, you can now get, if you're a certified teacher in the state of Michigan, you can get an 18 credit certificate. To qualify you, you can take the state certification test for being a school librarian with 18 credits. But 20 years ago, nobody would talk to me because I only had 33 credits in my master's program. So times change, right?
Things change, for sure.
Times change. I learned the hard way not to make career plans based on what you think others will be doing. And I think some school librarians have been very fortunate to move into vacancies in school libraries prior to finishing their certificate program. I've heard that from quite a few people. But for others, getting a certificate or a degree in library science would mean having to leave possibly their building and even their district to get a library job. That's a big ask.
It is. And, sometimes the stars align. And the year that I finished my degree was the year the librarian at my current school retired. And so it just worked out. But most of the time, we're not that lucky. And as you mentioned, schools are willing to hire someone who's currently in the program or starting the program. Sometimes that works out because they're sort of growing their own. They're choosing, a teacher who's interested in supporting them as they earn the degree. But yeah, it is a risk. And in South Carolina, if you earn the degree, most likely you're going to find a position that's pretty close to you. Maybe not in the same school, but probably the same district or county, or at least not too far of a drive. But I know, every state is different and what their situation is.
Absolutely. And again, every state is different. That's really an important thing to emphasize here. For me, in the state of Michigan, you in the state of South Carolina, it feels like a world apart. And so much of that has to do with how our school districts are defined, how big a program that and group of students you're supporting. I know in Michigan, we're losing students. We're losing our population is decreasing with every census. So
they must be moving here.
They are.
We are growing, growing.
Yes. When I hear about my friends in Georgia, South Carolina, and Texas, and their populations are doubling every 10 years and they're building new schools, we are sadly consolidating. We are closing schools. I did that 2 years ago. We closed 2 of our elementary schools and consolidated into 7, which I know you're looking at me like, I don't understand. I was like, when my students tell me, Miss Sermon, we're moving, I said, let me guess, Georgia? Texas, Miss Sermon. I'm like, okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it.
Yeah, I mean, we're bursting at the seams. We have portables in the school campus, and we're just growing so fast.
Wow. Friends, it is so hard to talk to somebody when you're so jealous of them at the same time.
Hey, come on down. It's beautiful weather here.
Well, and friends, I know that we have some listeners who have some flexibility with where they live. They are young enough.
Contact me. I will help you find a library job.
See, okay, you friends, you heard it here. South Carolina would like school librarians to move in. And even if you're working on that degree, it sounds like South Carolina is going to have a job for you. And
yes.
I applaud all of your efforts because they're paying off. They truly are. And I love the fact that you have secured places for your school librarians in school libraries. It's wonderful. Friends, do make sure you take a look at today's show notes because I think you'll find a lot of great resources. Let's shift our focus to recruiting. What is South Carolina doing to alleviate the shortage that you are experiencing? And I mentioned Michigan now has a certificate program, which is half the credits that one would have to get a master's. What is South Carolina doing?
Well, as far as state legislation, nothing of note to share to recruit, but for SCASL and our efforts, we have partnered with the University of South Carolina iSchool program to try to have recruiting meetings, both in person and online. We are also in South Carolina, if you have your national board certification, you get additional stipends. So we are encouraging as many of our librarians to get that as possible and helping them through that journey so that they will stay once they're in the position. The state has a loan forgiveness program. If you earn your master's in library science and start working in a library, your degree is paid for. So we're trying to recruit classroom teachers to earn that degree because it ends up being free and you get, that master's. If you are in the library working, they pay the loan back. And so we're trying to advertise that to great teachers and try to open their eyes to this possibility.
Okay, friends, free degree. That is, I can't say I've ever been able to say that on this show. So friends, if you're at all considering moving to the school library, because some of you are still in the classroom, also consider moving to South Carolina and contacting Tamara because, truly South Carolina is making so many things appeal and address this shortage, and paying for a master's program that's not chump change. Regardless if you are taking these classes in person, you're taking these classes virtually, this is still a considerable investment. And you mentioned something also that South Carolina does incentivize national board certified educators to be in the state. Is there a monetary incentive to become nationally board certified, or if you have a degree or you have that certificate?
So in the past, they did offer funding to help you pay for the process, but that is no longer there. But we do still have, we're still paying people that were grandfathered in before, but last year they opened it up to newly certified national board teachers now receive a state stipend, and then many districts also add additional money to try to lure more national board certified teachers to their districts. So it's very competitive within the districts, and they try to incentivize that and recruit as many people as they can. So you do receive a stipend for having your national board certification.
Well, I love that the state provides a stipend, because you're right. Not every district would necessarily decide that that's a commitment that they're willing to make financially to incentivize educators to come to their district, but they should. And so, all these reasons to invest more in our school librarians and invest in ourselves. Over the years, I have seen teachers posting in library Facebook pages something to the effect, I'm a classroom teacher and thinking about becoming a school librarian. Should I? And I think that the feedback has been very honest. School librarians love our jobs in spite of the challenges that we face, and there are many of them.
Yes, I really do love my job. Even right now, when it's kind of crazy out there, I do love my job. And I think what's important for us is to be ambassadors to our profession. But also, like you said, be honest, because it's not for everyone. And I want people to know both the pros and the cons, the challenges and the rewards, and make the best decision that they can about considering it. I don't want someone who thinks, oh, I'm just going to semi-retire and check books in and out all day. That's not, that's not the kind of person we want to recruit. We want to recruit someone who loves kids and loves reading and loves connecting with other teachers and collaborating. And so that's, I try to highlight those pieces of the job. And if it's someone who that appeals to them, then I try to give them the resources to help them make the best decision that they can. Oh,
absolutely. And I know when I chime in on those conversations, the first thing I tell them is to listen to the podcast, because very candid conversations about what we do every day. And I don't think we sugarcoat what we do. I think that there are enough obstacles that we have to be a very passionate group of dedicated educators to commit to working in a space which, regardless of the recent, sort of challenges and the sort of assault that has been on our profession because of the books that we put on our shelves, I think there are so many misconceptions of what people have about what we do. It's so much we've had to sort of change people's minds. I consider this a campaign. I'm going into my second year in a building, and I am still not done making a first impression on people, because I want them to recognize that we are an incredible asset, an incredible source of support to our educators and our administrators. And I know when our principal was hired just a couple weeks ago, you better believe I gave her a week, and I sent that email and said, "Hi, I'm your I'm your librarian." Was in the subject line, and I had to sit down with my principal, and my husband's like, "Well, did she make that appointment for you? Did she call you in?" I'm like, "No."
Oh,
that was me.
Wait.
I used to, because my friends, the other teachers are like, "Wow, is there a reason why you had to go in before school started to talk to the principal?" I'm like, this is about what I can do to support our new principal. And you better believe I want to have that sit down meeting. I even showed pictures of the vase of flowers I took her to our meeting, because this is about making sure that everybody in the school knows what all the good that we can do if we just are given that opportunity. It sounds like you have capitalized on the opportunities to collaborate with your teachers and supporting the programs that they do. I'd love to hear more about that forensics program, because our forensics program is huge, and how we can support those programs. I think that oftentimes teachers don't even think about us as somebody who can help them with the lessons, and they're like, no, I'm good. And you're like, actually, I can alleviate you of a great deal if you just would share with me what you're doing, and I can help you. Would you please share with listeners some of the efforts to encourage more educators to consider moving to the school library? There are listeners whose districts are experiencing shortages of school librarians, and it's really important that we have some ideas of what works for you in the state of South Carolina, to make sure that we have certified school librarians in all of our libraries.
So we'll start with the youngest outreach that we do at first. So we have in South Carolina a teacher cadet program, which is for seniors in high school who are considering an education degree. And they do this entire class and they get like AP credit. It's amazing. And so for SCASL, we have reached out and met with many of these teacher cadet groups, and they have little mini conferences, and we present about with teaching tips, but we also throw in the piece about, we're the librarians. This is how we can help you if you become a teacher, but also consider the career. And then the teacher cadet program is also tied in with another program called Teaching Fellows, which are college students pursuing their education degree, and they get big scholarships from our state to pursue that degree. And so we've gone to their conferences to continue to connect with these future educators, or hopefully future educators. And then another group that we've reached out to is our administrators. So I've been very lucky to have worked with very supportive administrators who are on the same page with me about what the library program should be. And just this past summer, I presented with now our former principal, because he was promoted, to the administrators at their summer conference about supporting libraries and what a library program can do for your school. So we try to reach out to as many different types of groups as we can. We also work with the University of South Carolina to do some recruiting meetings and connect people who are considering the career with their iSchool program.
Wow. I'm hoping you might be able to share some links in our show notes that might give listeners a better idea of what these programs entail. If you could at all include any sort of information on the cadet program, and it would be fantastic, because replicating something like this wouldn't happen overnight. But I think that just getting that idea in my head, I know we have our medical skills students who walk around in their scrubs, and they go out into the field and they work in offices, and they get a sort of a taste of what it's like to work in the medical services. But there isn't anything in our schools about teaching, future teachers of America, sort of inspiring our students to become teachers. And there's certainly no formal way for them to get class credit to do it.
They even do a mini student teaching. They go into the field and partner with the teacher. It's really fun. So many of those programs, the teacher cadets, the teacher fellows, even our state teacher of the year program, fall under this state organization called SARA, which is the Center for Education, Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement. And I'm serving on their board. So I love that they, include me as a librarian and educator. And they just really do amazing things for our state. And the Teacher of the Year program is also part of that, which I was lucky enough to be a finalist for the 2020 State Teacher of the Year. And that's how I really made connections with that group and the leaders in that group, which have kind of opened the doors for us to go to these teacher cadet and teaching fellow events and have, our opportunity to share what a librarian does. So, just making connections with people like that has been very helpful for our efforts.
Well, and again, making this sort of appreciating what needs to happen in order for there to be more certified school librarians in our buildings, we need to have more certified educators in our buildings. Mm-hmm. And so it is very, I don't want to call it self-serving, but it makes all the sense in the world that we are encouraging our students to become educators so they can become school librarians. I made connecting those dots for me. I'm just doing this right now. I'm during this conversation. I'm fascinated. I'm hoping you will include some links in the show notes. It is so impressive because you've had to think outside of your immediate space. I think so many of us have become so consumed with all the aspects of what our program within sort of the brick and mortar, within the brick and mortar of our own space. And we recognize that we have an opportunity to on a much greater level, bring more educators into this profession. And we should be considering the implications of what happens if we don't. Mm-hmm. And I think as ambassadors of our profession, we owe it to our profession to be those advocates of all the good that we can do, because people are paying attention. People recognize that school librarians make a difference, and if the more we raise the profile of our own jobs, and like you, connecting with leaders in the larger education community to bring educators into our school libraries to become school librarians, I think the more fun we make it look, the more likely people are going to be like, I want your job.
Yeah, for sure. It is fun. And, that's what I want people to see. It's just what a wonderful job it is. And, maybe you're happy in the classroom, and that's fine. But maybe you would also be happy here in the library.
My assistant this year, and he's fantastic, is a retired math teacher. And it's almost like he's getting another education, because he is fantastic. He retired, but he wasn't ready to retire, and he came back as my assistant. And it's interesting to see a classroom educator recognize the additional challenges that we have as a school library. Mm-hmm. And I've repeatedly said, we need to prove why we're important and why we're needed. And he sort of looks at me quizzically. I'm like, nobody has ever considered letting go the 7th grade math teacher, because you're not considered optional.
Right.
And so you can sort of see all of this appreciation for what we do, recognize that we have to prove that we are essential to our students' learning experiences. Oh, wow. Tamara, I'm so grateful that you were able to take some time out of your busy day to join us. Would you please, because I, in addition to the links in the show notes, would you please let listeners know how they can reach out to you? Because now that they know they can get a graduate degree in the state of South Carolina and become school librarians.
Yeah, I might be getting some emails.
Yes, I'm going to say there's a possibility somebody might want to follow and learn more about your amazing state. Would you share with us how we can get a hold of you, please?
Yes, so I definitely want to encourage you to follow our state organization. And on Twitter, it is SCASL Net, N-E-T. And then I am mostly, Twitter for me is where my library people are. So you can also find me there. It's Cox TL, COXTL. I am private right now for reasons that would be a whole other episode, but just ask to follow me, and I'm just sort of filtering the requests right now. Hopefully that is a temporary situation. But
fantastic. Tamara, I am so grateful that you were able to join us today. And especially because I know that there are listeners who are taking in all the things that you've shared with us today and realizing that we have an opportunity here, and we should, wherever we are in the world and around the country, make our efforts known to the educators who would hopefully join us in this fantastic profession, which we all love. So thank you so much, and have a great day at school.
Thank you so much.
Friends, I think you'll agree that there's so much we can learn from one another when we take the time to hear about each other's experiences and our stories, and learning what it's like to be a school librarian in other parts of the country. And hopefully you will take away from this conversation, as I have, a better appreciation of what it's like to be a school librarian, and these amazing resources, which Tamara so generously shared in her show notes. Friends, make time to visit our show notes. You won't be sorry. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sharing a little fan mail with Tamara. I know that she would love to hear from you. One last friendly reminder, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more for using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be Teaching Media Awareness, and my conversation with Jamie Gregory. I hope you will tune in.